Well, ANC Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte said last night that more than half the names on the list are new. They're retaining only 40 to 45% of the current councillors and candidates around the country. She cited gender equity and youth representation as key issues for the changes, but as you've seen, there is a lot of discontent on the ground already. Let's discuss this now with Professor Susan Boyson, Director of Research at the Bongubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Good evening, Prof. Thank you so much for your time. Is it unprecedented for the ANC to have such big changes on their list that over half of the candidates have been done away with?
Well, Sally, good evening. It is quite unprecedented to have it to this extent, but we do know in many elections before, sometimes when there was a factional transition from Zuma to Thabo Mbeki to Jacob Zuma, in those elections there were huge turnovers, so those were national and provincial. In other cases there were also quite some big turnovers, and because the ANC also needs this kind of statement to show that by removing people it is renewing, it's bringing in new hope that the governance in the next period could go somewhat better. So it is not unprecedented, although 40 to 45% only retention, that is very high. And we can expect, therefore, that there is going to be much dissent on the ground. It is interesting, though, that the cases I've specifically heard of protest and this kind of mobilization that we saw outside ANC's Luthuli House, also, according to most reports that I've seen, although those are from limited areas, not widespread. There's some, and then the protest at the Luthuli House was probably those from Moretele, local municipality in the Northwest Province, where they descended on Luthuli House over the weekend. We yet have to see the exact details, the fiber of these protests, whether it is factional and whether there were good reasons to have candidates removed, because we know in the cases there were removals, there were nominations in the first place, and then removals of people who had been implicated in criminal charges against them, and could very well be against those.
Yeah, and Jesse Duarte making the point that if you've been charged in a court of law, you are not going to be on the list. It was interesting, Desin Thathia, our reporter covering the protests outside the KwaZulu-Natal ANC provincial headquarters, he asked them how many people they represent, and the answer there, what they said to him is that we represent about 50% of the branches. But as you say, it remains to be seen how widespread this unhappiness is. You spoke that, you said that it's often normal if there's a new leader within the party that there is this churn. But it was quite interesting in the interview that Sipho Mandla did, where the one person obviously expecting to be on the list said, well, I'm not on the list because I'm not perceived to be a supporter of Cyril Ramaphosa. Is that part of the course, and you'd expect that, or does it just show that there are still very deep divisions within the ANC? You're either pro or anti-Ramaphosa.
Yes, indeed, and that's a very important part of this elections nomination, that the nominations are superimposed on very deep divisions within the ANC and huge animosities between the factions. And it will be interesting to see in the next few weeks as to the extent to which these charges of manipulation of branches play out in the direction of either of the two factions. It could very well be that some people who were legitimately removed by processes of voting in a community, but claimed afterwards perhaps that they were removed for factional reasons. That is one of the political tricks that we see sometimes. But if there had indeed been manipulation, let's say by Ramaphosa supporters, to keep other people off those lists and out of official nomination statuses, I'm sure those will also be revealed in the next few weeks. And so we can expect this higher level of transparency and demands for accountability from their own leadership, that those will be playing out very, very vividly and in the public domain.
We've also seen in the run-up to every local government election, tragically, we see assassination of people who are standing to be ward candidates, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. Do you think that that potential for violence, which is always there, is now heightened?
No, the potential is certainly there. And given the recent outbursts and unrest in the country and type of factional violence that we saw manifested in that form, the sensitivities are very tangible. And the tendencies to sort out, to deal with, to kill, assassinate political leaders that have a good chance to get into elections, nominated as candidates, and then possibly could either reveal corruption or could unduly, in that sense of the word, monopolize resources in a new council. We have often seen in KwaZulu-Natal, in a run-up to 2016 elections, for example, around 20 political assassinations happened around the country, and the bulk of them were in KwaZulu-Natal. In a period since then, there have been about another 20 political assassinations, and these are very often linked to councilorships or nominations for council positions in the run-up and even after the elections for those municipal councils. And so that has been part of political culture in South Africa, in some provinces also more than in others. And we can expect that there can be cases. There have been a few instances of violence around several nomination meetings or branch meetings of the ANC in recent months. The most recent was about a week ago in Unhappiness.
Yeah. And you know, it's a difficult one to assess because we're either going to have the elections in October or it'll be sometime next year. We're seeing a lot of shifts. We're seeing in the Northwest there's been an interim provincial committee in charge since 2018. We've just seen a new mayor installed in Mangaung who is perceived to be a supporter of Ace Magashule. The party has a suspended SG who's facing corruption charges. There's so much at flux within the ANC and around the voting environment. What areas or what issues are you going to be keeping a really close eye on in the coming months?
Well, you know, in the first place, there is going to be a continuous effort for the ANC to show that it is transforming and it's dealing with corruption. And of course, then it is going to step on, to the extent that it will be brave enough to follow through on that, it is going to step on political toes. So I'm really going to be looking out for accountability and campaigning and who succeeds with what kind of reputations and who slips through the ranks in these nominations for these very important positions. And then overall, one will be keeping a lookout for the possible coalition potentials that emerge in these elections, where the ANC has been slipping in recent elections, but then in 2019 had some reinstatement of lost support. We will be looking out for how much support is it gaining or losing, because that will predict the level of political coalition formation post-election. And we know that those governments can be very unstable and those majorities can be constructed in very unaccountable ways. And so it's the strength of the ANC and how much it pulls through and convinces the electorate that it is indeed transforming and cleaning up and has the guts to follow through against more corrupt elements in its own ranks. Those will be very important areas to watch.
I'm sure we'll be chatting more in the months to come. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Professor Susan Boyson, Director of Research at the Mabongubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection.